This past Monday, there was a lot of energy and a lot of talk and a lot of activity about the solar eclipse. And on one end of the spectrum, there were a lot of excited people. Like the total eclipse, there was a path that came through the United States and Mexico and Canada where like 31 people were in this pathway. But in advance of Monday, there were some crazy people that were making travel arrangements, like getting on planes and going into this pathway where they could too experience, like it was estimated about 4 million people were doing this and going into this pathway so that they could celebrate or see this total eclipse. And there were even in towns that were in this pathway, there were festivals, like eclipse festivals and watch parties. In Ohio, there was this town where they had this mass wedding at like 100 couples eloped during the eclipse. They called it Elope at the Eclipse. And the theme song was Total Eclipse of the Heart. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. Like I don't know if that was the theme song or not. But the event really did happen. The event happened. So you had this excited group of people that were on this side of the spectrum, but then there was me on the other end of the spectrum, to where I didn't really care to see the eclipse. I knew it was happening, but I didn't plan for it. I didn't schedule my day around it. I didn't buy these eclipse glasses that I could see the eclipse with. I didn't plan on, at any point in my day, I didn't even know when the best time to see it was in Raleigh. So I didn't plan around that. And so I was finishing a meeting just after lunchtime, and I walked out into the lobby, and I was like, it looks kind of weird outside. I'm going to walk outside and see what this looks like. And so I looked up at the sun, like squinting up at the sun, and just at that time, Caitlin, my daughter, texts me, and she's like, hey, Dad, you need to go find Tyler, and you need to get his eclipse glasses, and you need to go out, and you need to look at the sun. And I'm like, well, I text Caitlin back. I said, well, Kate, I'm outside right now, and I'm looking at the sun, and it looks fine. Like I can see the sun. And she's like, oh, my word, Dad. So I did go find Tyler, and I did get his eclipse glasses, and I did put them on. I went outside, and I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. And it was one of those ones, like it changed everything. So when I was out there, you're squinting, your eyes are watering, you're trying to see if there's any difference. And it's not recommended that you look at the sun, not just last Monday, but any day. But when I put those glasses on, it changed everything. It was like a wow moment for me. Like I could see this partial eclipse. We weren't in that pathway, but I could see this partial eclipse of the sun. And those glasses, these glasses, they changed everything. I can't see you when I put them on, but they changed everything. And then I got to thinking about this series that we're currently in. And we started on Easter, the resurrection of Jesus. And we said that the resurrection of Jesus changes everything. That an encounter with Jesus transforms your life. And so we started with Mary Magdalene, the first person that Jesus saw after his resurrection. And we said that Mary, when she came to the tomb, she came loaded down with grief and despair and confusion. And she came with nothing. She came expecting nothing. She came with nothing. But when Mary left, after an encounter with Jesus, she left worshiping him. She left with hope. She left with purpose and meaning, a totally different perspective. And then last week we talked about doubting Thomas, where he said, unless I see Jesus, I'll never believe. He was full of cynicism and skepticism, and we said you can't build a life on those. But after he saw Jesus, the wounds in his hands and his side, doubting Thomas turned from a doubter to a believer. Seeing was believing, and it was transformative in their lives. But while that was true for Mary and for Thomas, it didn't seem to be true for a guy named Peter. I mean, we know Peter. He was an ordinary fisherman turned disciple. And not just the disciple. Like, he was one of the leaders, if not the leader of the disciples. He was one of 3 disciples that were the closest to Jesus. He was the one that seemed to always step up first and act first. Remember when Jesus was walking to the disciples in the night, and he was walking on the water, and they thought it was a ghost. They finally found out it was Jesus, and Peter said, Jesus, if it's you, tell me, and I'll jump out of this boat, and I'll walk on the water, and which is what happened. So we know that about Peter. Peter saw things that you just can't forget. Like, he saw Jesus transfigured in front of him on the mountain, talking to Elijah and Moses. Peter was always ready to engage and respond to what Jesus was saying. In fact, one time at dinner, Jesus said that you're all going to deny me. Peter's like, Jesus, look, I don't know about all these guys. That might be true of them, but I'm not going to deny you. That's just never going to happen with me. He had elevated himself on a different level than the rest of the disciples. He was the one, after all, that claimed that Jesus was really the Messiah. So Peter had set himself up, and he believed that there was nothing that was going to shake him. There was nothing that was going to take him or knock him off of this pedestal of his allegiance to Jesus. But then we all know the rubber met the road. And Peter wasn't who he thought he was. He wasn't as strong as he thought he was. And he remembered Jesus saying that you're going to deny me. And he's like, nah, I don't think so. But then on the eve of his crucifixion, he denied Jesus. And when he heard the rooster crow the second time, he had already denied Jesus, knowing Jesus 3 times. And so when that happened, he realized what he did. And every gospel account says that he was crushed with emotion. He wept bitterly. He had failed Jesus. He had been with him for years, a couple years. But now his time with him ended in failure. And he was wrestling with the shame. It had overwhelmed him and it had blinded him. We all deal with guilt and shame. All of us. In the room, watching online. For something we said, something we did, or maybe something we're still struggling with. We deal with it. Could be some harm you inflicted on someone else. Could be harming yourself. It could be that you were the victim of someone that harmed you, and you wear this shame. It could be you cheated in order to get ahead somehow, or make yourself look better, or maybe cheated on an exam or a test or at work, or in some way just to get an edge. Could be sexual sin that you've dealt with in the past, or maybe you circle back to, or maybe you're currently struggling with. It could be an addiction that you have now or that you have hid. Maybe you're hiding it right now and you've done a pretty good job of hiding it. It could be a lie or a series of lies that you have told, again, to present yourself differently. Listen, the list goes on. Somewhere along the line, you can find yourself on the list and you have experienced this weight of shame and guilt. And I know we all have dealt with it because it's in our DNA. All you have to do is open the first couple pages of the Bible and you see that our guilt and our shame is rooted in sin. So when God created humanity, Adam and Eve, they were perfect. They enjoyed a relationship with God and a relationship with each other. It wasn't marked by sin, but then what happened? They rebelled against God. And the moment that they rebelled against God, guilt and shame came into their lives. They began to feel what that felt like. And while guilt was tied to what they did, shame was the aftermath of the guilt that they felt. And shame, when it comes in, it just sticks to you. And you can't seem to get rid of it. And so the moment that they felt that, it was now tied to who they were, to their identity. And they were thinking like, oh, something is wrong with me. Like I am now broken. I am undone now. I'm dirty. Like I'm damaged goods now. And the result of their shame was that they tried to cover themselves from each other and even hide from God. And from that moment moving forward, men and women have been trying to hide from each other and from God because of their shame. Living life defeated, living life overwhelmed and blinded by this feeling of shame and feeling that they are less than in some way. Maybe that's you this morning. When you came into this room or turned online, you came in blinded and overwhelmed with your shame. You feel like you are damaged goods. You feel like you're a failure. You feel like no one could ever forgive you for what you have done. You can't even forgive yourself, and it just plagues you. You feel the weight of it. That's exactly where Peter was in John chapter 21. If you have your Bibles, you can turn to John, and we've been in the Gospel of John the last few chapters, walking through encounters that Jesus had with different people. And in this encounter, Peter couldn't seem to get rid of his shame, but Jesus is approaching Peter with a different set of lenses. And Jesus wants Peter to see his shame through these different lenses, and it's the same set of lenses that Jesus wants to offer to me and to you this morning, because shame left unchecked and unattended to will in one way or another dictate how you and I relate to God, how we relate to ourselves, and how we relate to one another. And I firmly believe that Jesus knew that Peter needed a one-on-one encounter with him in order to be rescued and saved from his shame. And the same is true for you and I. And so beginning at verse 1 of John chapter 21, it reads this: Afterward, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way: Simon Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two other disciples were together. I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them. And they said, we'll go with you. So they went out and got into the boat. But that night they caught nothing. Fishing, it was what Peter did before he met Jesus. It's what he used to do. It was what he did before Jesus found him and before Jesus changed his name and before Jesus gave him a new identity and a new purpose. And the Bible tells us that when Peter first encountered Jesus, he left everything, all he knew, and followed after Jesus. But now, in shame, not knowing how to move forward with his life without Jesus, he turns back. And the last few years that he had spent with Jesus, now he has disqualified himself from it. He's no longer useful and available to him. He had blown it. And that's what shame does to you. It talks to you. Talks to me. Tries to convince us that as a result of something we did or something we said, that we are its victims. Shame whispers to us, it lies to us that we are forever damaged and we are forever unusable, that people and God will never look at us the same way again. Shame tries to attach our identity to who we think we are instead of who God says that we are. That's what shame does. Shame works to pull us back and distance us from Jesus. In the beginning, when Adam and Eve sinned, shame pulled them back when they heard God walking in the garden. Shame was covering King David after he had committed adultery with Bathsheba. And then he started to do some stuff to try and cover up his shame. Without realizing it, our shame takes over and begins to inform our activity and our relationships. Just think about it. If I'm worried about you finding out about something that I did in my past or something that I said or something that I am currently doing, then I'm going to hide from you. I am going to keep you at arm's length from me. And I will present to you the image that I want you to see, not allowing you to get close enough to see and to know the real me. And if you press in on me, then I will lash out at you, or I might even shut down. If I don't think I'm enough, or I could ever do enough, then I might overcompensate and then hide behind that, or I might not even try for fear of failure or fear of being found out. If I'm broken and I'm hurting, then maybe I'll try and pull you in with me, bring you down with me, or I might try and make you feel sorry for me. The emotion of shame is stronger than we think it is. Our core belief when we are wrestling with shame is that if you really knew me, you would not want to be in relationship with me. Shame is more powerful than we give it credit for. I was reading a Hebrew scholar this past week, and he says in the West, we've done a pretty good job of trying to separate shame and what's happening below the surface from our body and from our activity. But the more we try and hide it, the more we try and put a lid on it, the more consumed we get with our shame, and sooner or later it bubbles out into our activity. And Peter's shame was dictating his actions. He was falling back to what he used to do before Jesus, and now it was beginning to affect others and influence and impact others because they're now following him to fish, and they fished all night, and the result was that there wasn't any relief there. They didn't catch anything. And there wouldn't be any relief until Peter would encounter Jesus. And so we keep reading At verse 4, early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. And he called out to them, "Friends," in another translation, it's children, "haven't you any fish?" "No," they answered. He said, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some." When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and jumped into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from the shore, about 100 yards. When they landed, they saw a fire burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. And Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish you have just caught." So Simon Peter climbed into the boat and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153, but even with so many, the net was not torn. And Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." None of his disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came, took the bread and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the third time, not the first, the third time Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. Even though Peter was moving away from Jesus, Jesus was moving toward him. I don't want you to miss that. Remember, Peter had already encountered Jesus a couple times. And we don't know everything that happened in those encounters. We know some stuff by reading the scriptures, but we don't know everything. We don't know if Peter and Jesus ever talked about the fact that Peter denied him. We don't know if Peter apologized. We don't know if Peter avoided the conversation altogether. We don't know if Peter was like, "Hey, Jesus, look, yeah, about what happened, last week. So, Jesus, you got it, that was a really heated moment. There was a lot of stuff going on, and I may or may not have said some things that I kind of regret." We don't know. We don't know what that conversation was, or even if that conversation ever happened. But now, Jesus is going right at his shame. Jesus moves towards us in our shame. He knows that if Peter is going to be saved from his shame and be useful in the future, he will need to face his shame. So Jesus orchestrates, in my opinion, the best place and time to have an encounter with him: on the beach at sunrise. That's just my opinion. But by their reaction, they didn't think that Jesus would be there. They weren't expecting him, which is interesting to me, because we don't expect Jesus either when we blow it. We don't expect to see him. We don't expect to encounter him after we do something that we are ashamed of. Shame makes us think that God couldn't love me anymore. Again, when Adam and Eve sinned, God the Father pursued them. They didn't pursue him. When Peter gets to the beach, the scene, everything that just happened and is happening, all of it, man, it had to trigger all kinds of thoughts and emotions in the life of Peter. We have all experienced what Peter is experiencing in this moment, where we have said something or done something in our past, and then we hear something or we see something or something happens, and it triggers something inside of us, and it brings us back to that point when we did whatever we did or said whatever we said that we were ashamed of. Peter's shame is now on full display in this scene. But Jesus does not scold him. He does not condemn him. He is not looking to punish him. He's not out to harm him. You have to see this. He is out to save him. Jesus is on a rescue mission to save Peter from himself. I don't know about you, but I've been on some of those. I've experienced some of those rescue missions from Jesus who loves me. So Jesus essentially says to Peter, hey, let's talk about where you are right now. Let's talk about how you are feeling. So it's verse 14, when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? More than what? More than the fish? More than the other disciples who you said you would never deny, but they would deny me? Do you love me more than them? Do you love me more than this whole scene right here? All these fish that do you love me? Peter's, yes, Lord. He said, I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord. You know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know everything. Man, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. Very truly, I tell you, Peter, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you to where you do not want to go. Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, follow me. Jesus walks with us through our shame. Jesus had recreated this whole scene on the beach. First with the miraculous catch of fish. That was when he first encountered Peter. Same thing happened. Second, he reverts back to calling Peter by the name he had before Jesus changed it. Third, he builds a fire similar to the fire where Peter denied him. Burning coals in this text is only mentioned one other time. You know where? At the fire where Peter denied him. Fourth, over a meal similar to where Peter said he would never deny him. Now Jesus asks him 3 times, do you love me? Replicating the 3 times that Peter denied him. What in the world did Jesus go through all of this for with Peter? Could it be that in order to help restore him and heal him emotionally, he had to help Peter see his shame differently? He had to help Peter see that he forgives him and is loving him through it. You and I cannot cover up our shame. You can't just ignore it and move on. You simply own it. You own it and you move through it. It happened. Whatever you did, whatever you said, whatever was done to you, it happened. Then the guilt comes and the shame comes. Peter did it. It was a scar that he would carry, but what Jesus wanted him to see is that while it is in his past, it does not define his future. It won't define his future. He wasn't damaged beyond repair. You and I are not damaged beyond repair. We're not left to sit in our shame and in our guilt. Jesus paid for all of our guilt and sin on the cross. He didn't bring condemnation, but saving grace and forgiveness. But we still seem to wrestle with this shame. What do we do with this shame that seems to come in waves in and out of our lives? The aftermath of sin, well, the writer of Hebrews tells us Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. The writer of Hebrews points us to bring our shame to Jesus, who came face to face with the shame of the cross and scorned it and despised it. This past week I was reading, and I love how John Piper presents this in his own words about what Jesus did to shame on the cross. Listen to this. He says this: "Listen to me, shame. Do you see that joy in front of me? Compared to that, you are less than nothing. You are not worth comparing to that. I despise you. You think you have power? Compared to the joy before me, you have none. Joy, 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 that is my power. Not you, shame. You are worthless. You are powerless. You think you can distract me. I won't even look at you. I have a joy set before me. Why would I look at you? You are ugly and despicable, and you are almost finished. You cover me now as with a shroud before you can say, so there, I will throw you off like a filthy rag. I will put on my royal robe. You think you are great because even last night you made my disciples run away. You are a fool, shame. You are a despicable fool. That abandonment, that loneliness, this cross, these tools of yours, they are all my sacred suffering and will save my disciples, not destroy them. You are a fool. Your filthy hands fulfill holy prophecy. Farewell, shame. It is finished." I love it. Jesus had taken care of the guilt of sin and the shame that follows, and that is what he now communicates to Peter. Each time that Jesus asked Peter, "Do you love me?" and Peter responded, "Jesus, yeah, you know I love you. You know that." And he said, "Feed my lambs, tend to my sheep." What he was doing is he was restoring Peter, inviting him back onto mission. He was pointing him forward to show him what was in front of him. He even told him how he was going to die. That his life would no longer be defined by the shame that he carried, but by his calling to advance the gospel. The calling that, again, he would eventually die for. So a week before this encounter, he was denying Jesus among a few people. But if you turn the pages, in a couple months, he was proclaiming Jesus before thousands, walking into the mission that Jesus gave him. Jesus had helped him see his shame differently. It was still in the background, but it didn't drive him. Didn't define him, didn't move him away from Jesus. It moved him toward Jesus. So what do we do with this today? As I stated earlier, shame is a powerful emotion. It sticks to you. And if you don't deal with it, it can be extremely harmful in how you look at yourself, how you view your Heavenly Father, and then how you love people. Shame messes with your love for people. The greatest command, love Jesus with all you have, and then love others as yourself. That all gets short-circuited because of shame. So today, I'm just going to give you an invitation to leave your shame here. And when they sing, the worship team is going to come and sing. If you just want to come and kneel and leave your shame here, bring it to Jesus. And don't walk in it anymore. Walk free from it. Now I get it. There's some big hurt in this room online. So it might involve you seeing a counselor, somebody that can help you walk through your shame. But it starts here, admitting it, bringing it to Jesus, and allowing Him to work in you and on you. Invite some trusted friends maybe this week if you're really wrestling. Let them see you. Don't listen to shame. Shame's going to tell you, don't admit it, don't confess it. But I want you to walk free of your shame. For some reason, we think God wants us to punish ourselves for what we've done and for the shame we carry. That He wants us to feel miserable for who we are, what we've done. But the greater truth is that the blood of Jesus took care and takes care of all of our sin, of all of our guilt, and of all of our shame. So this morning, don't walk out of here living in shame. Bring your shame to Jesus and let Him walk through it with you.